Good everyone, we are back with the next episode of The Captain and the Coach, of course, with Trav, Captain Carruthers, and myself, James, the Coach McCracken. And today, Trav, we are talking about the three best and three worst pieces of advice that we've received. Although I think we're going to focus a little bit more around you and your experiences with this advice. So, maybe give us a bit of background. Why did you think our audience might have an interest in hearing your view and maybe my view on good or poor advice?
Okay, in the early days, I had an affirmation on my bathroom window, on my bathroom mirror, sorry, that said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I took that very literally and worked very, very hard at getting myself into rooms where I was surrounded by very smart people. And by doing that and not listening and taking on their advice and going ahead and actioning it would have, I mean, it would be a pointless exercise. So um, not everyone would be as fortunate as me to have had these opportunities. So this episode is essentially an opportunity for them to sort of get some insights from my perspective as a business owner and me coming up in the industry about some of the pieces of advice that worked really well for me, and then getting you to put your lens over the top of these as a coach, right? Like the dynamic here, I think, is really good. I've been taking this advice and going ahead and actioning it. You've been providing advice for a very long period of time and successfully, might I add, to a range of brokers across the country. So I think it'd be a real value add for our listenership.
Cool. Okay, that's good context. So, with that in mind, let's kick it off with what are we going with first? Worst advice? How about we do that and then we lean into the best advice second?
Okay, we'll start off and we'll finish strong. That sounds like a good plan.
Good. So, number one, what have you got?
In my early days, one of the pieces of advice that I got was just do a good job and your clients will refer. And that was literally it. So don't worry about Google reviews, don't worry about marketing, don't worry about when you look at our verse, our NLP sales, let's not call it a script,
Structure?
process. Yeah, so it's you can be great at your job, but if no one knows what you do, it's very, very hard to grow a business, right? So
Hang on, pause for a sec.
yep.
So there's a lot of things you've just said, but let's just nut it down into the specific advice. So, because you said within that statement, don't worry about marketing, don't worry about Google reviews. Did someone actually say those things to you, or did they explicitly say, if you do a good job, then you will earn referrals?
Yeah, it sort of formed part of that same conversation, but essentially the crux of the conversation was as long as you're securing a strong outcome for your client is going to refer their friends and family, and you're going to grow a successful business off the back of that, which I disagree with. We this is one of the things, right? Clients,
Well, can I ask you, before you go into it, is it possible that advice might have been highly relevant when there was half as many mortgage brokers and therefore there was two times as many consumers per broker, and it was potentially possible to earn business that way as opposed to the current marketplace where arguably some brokers are competing against each other and as well as the banks. So is that possible?
oh, yeah, it's possible, but I still don't think it's relevant even back then, right? So you're essentially what we do, like the industry has evolved and things are changing and tech's coming in, but at the core of it, what we're doing is we're dealing with clients, we're trying to secure strong outcomes and we're trying to build a business off the back of this. So if your clients aren't aware of your strategy or you're not coaching them into referring,
Yep.
they're not going to refer. Like some of my best referrers that I've got, they've been coached into it. I've had to coach them and had to outline to them how to introduce a client. And once they understand it, that's when the referrals start to flow. And it's around trying to do this almost subliminally with your clients without sort of slapping them in the face with it. And it's around so we've spent a lot of time and effort um, putting this process together. For me personally, the way that my business is structured, because we've
Yep.
got the contractor model and I've got so many other bits and pieces at play. I don't have time to go spend a huge amount of time with agents and accountants and referral partners. My
Yep.
business is purely built off warm referrals. So I've got to excel at that piece to continue. And the majority of our new business comes from warm referrals from our current clients. And the better I get at it, the more volume we see in the business. So
So Let's, before we move on to the second one, because I want to keep this reasonably concise for everyone, I think there's a couple of things to be said here. Is that there's plenty of brokers out there who have categorically built enviable businesses where, according to them, they've never told any of their clients that they would appreciate or value getting referred to friends and family. Just because there's people out there that have done that is, I think, to your point, not necessarily good advice that that's the way we should all hope that it works for the rest of us. And I think there is something to be said for having a structured, proactive, we'll call it education oriented approach. So your clients know that in addition to being a client, you would like them to be an advocate and to recommend. Is that
Definitely.
reasonable?
Yeah, yeah, and we hear brokers that have been quite successful. They talk about building raving fans out of their clients. Their clients aren't supporters of the brand; they're fans. And when you're a fan of something, you want to tell your friends and family, right?
Dude, I know it. I did a presentation of that like 10 years ago. I can still remember one of the main slides. Okay, next, what have you got?
This is a funny one. I got told by someone that was actually in the business at the time that this whole tech was a shiny distraction, and it's got no legs, and it's a waste of time, and it's just not there's no future in tech. At the core, mortgage broking is sitting around a dinner table on a Wednesday night with a scrap bit of paper and a pen and scribbling out some mud maps for your clients was essentially how it worked. And I was very, very junior in the business, and this person had a lot more experience than me, and I was sort of made me question myself. And I went, no, I believe you're wrong. This is the direction we're heading in. That person ended up they weren't on board with what we are doing. Like great guy, right? But
Yeah.
they weren't on board with what we're doing. And then look at the history of Vertus. Like Vertus is a high tech, high touch. Our growth that we've experienced over the last 5 years has been like unbelievable, and it's all off the back of the technology piece that we've
Can
built. So
can I ask, did he go to those appointments in a horse and cart, or did he drive a car there?
yes, yes, it was. Look, he was sort of backing in the back end of his career anyway. Really nice guy,
I'm
right?
not
But
trying to be condescending, but it's
no,
interesting how people say that. It's like, well, was he using papyrus and a like a fountain pen or whatever, or a like I think people sometimes make statements like that that's convenient to justify a particular belief
yeah,
that they have and to justify their own decisions. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a reality. It's just the reality that they're trying to manifest or maintain for themselves.
yeah,
But we as people are contradictions in terms because yes, we'll drive, the most modern car, but no, we don't want to have a paperless office or we don't want to do these other things again because it helps us substantiate a belief that we think for whatever reason is useful to us.
yeah, definitely. And he wasn't the only one I was having this conversation with. There were other people that I was working with early in my career that like 25-page paper-based fact find form that we'd have to physically drive to the office. Like it's crazy. And like there was so many conversations I was having with people, and they're like, "Oh, Trav, like what you're doing is quite novel, and it sounds exciting, but it's I don't see how it's scalable." And I'm like, it's like you look at the tech piece in our business now. If I had to pull the tech out and replace it with staff,
Mm.
my wage bill is probably going to go up by $500,000 a year.
Mate, there's a
Like
reason
so,
why when people were questioning Henry Ford, and look, I'm not necessarily a an advocate in every sense of the word of the production line. I think there's something to be said for having a personalized approach to things as well. I think it's like a lot of things in life, there's pros and cons to a lot of what we could look at. But he said if I wanted to make I said essentially be the same as the marketplace, I would have made a quicker horse. And that's not what he was doing, right? He
no.
built something different and he certainly had scale that making more horses wasn't going to have.
And you look at where we're positioned, like I'm not just talking about in the finance industry. We look at AI and look at how rapidly technology is evolving at the moment, like it's a really, really exciting time. And the people that are on the front, they're on the front foot with this, that are the early adopters, are the ones that are going to see the biggest uplift, I think. And this is where we were quite lucky. We were very early to the piece, and then we saw value in it. And now as an industry, we're seeing people that are starting to take note and starting to try and incorporate these things. And this is where we're sort of Advertis, we've made the decision. Well, okay, we've gapped the market to a certain extent with what we've built. And it's like, do we just sit on our laurels now and just wait for everyone to catch up, or do we keep pushing hard? And I think we're probably pushing as hard as we ever have to try and continue. And we've sort of got the benefit of the mistakes we've made and some learnings that we've got to make some more strategic decisions around technology and continue to evolve our client experience and improve the business.
Out of curiosity, and if you could keep this as concise as possible, is it that you think you use better tech than peers, or is it that you think you use the same tech more effectively to derive a different outcome?
Definitely option two. I'm not a coder. I'm literally taking tech and integrating it with other tech and just customizing it so it's best poke.
Right.
It's not I don't have some proprietary piece of tech.
Yeah, that's
I just
okay.
have
I thought that was the case. And the only reason I ask, more so for the benefit of the audience who might be wondering that, but also because it's not uncommon for me to hear that most, or frequently, I should say, I shouldn't say most, it's frequently the case that people will have tech, but not be deriving the benefit or value out of that piece that they may want. And therefore, they want to absolutely get more, squeeze more juice from the orange rather than get more oranges, so to speak. What have you
definitely.
got? What's your next advice?
Last one, the last
Or
worst piece of advice I got was offshoring does not work. I got told that by multiple people when we looked to
really?
go offshore. Yeah, it's a few years ago now. Again, that's probably not relevant now. People aren't going to believe that piece of
Even
advice.
when you started though, like offshoring was still a thing back then. It wasn't like that was new. I mean, offshoring's been happening for 30 years.
Yeah,
So, like 22 years ago, or sorry, 8 years ago, it's not exactly at its infancy, despite the fact that maybe a lot of people weren't doing it back then.
yeah. Well, I was like, when I look at my decision process when we went offshore, business was very, very juvenile. We didn't have the benefit of a big trail book. So people were telling me offshore doesn't work. Like you should be hiring onshore. And my decision was purely based on cash flow. I was like,
Mm.
no, no, I can hire an offshore person for half the price of an onshore person.
Yeah.
So that is the basis for my decision. And I'm just going, I hope it works. It wasn't like I would love to say that it was strategic and I always knew that offshoring was going to work. It wasn't. It was a price point thing for me back then. But now we've built our systems and processes that facilitates a really strong offshore team. And so our offshore team's is actually called the operations team within the business because they're the engine room. They're the ones that are driving this business forward.
Yep.
But it's our offshore team is invaluable. The proof is there, and I mean there's some pretty successful businesses that got some pretty like there's some of the bigger businesses that got 200 or 300 offshore staff members. So there's proof in the
Which is
concept.
arguably more than what some of the offshoring companies have themselves in some cases.
Exactly.
All right, cool. So that's three of your worst pieces of advice. That's interesting. Let's just recap them again. So number one,
If you do a good job, your clients will refer.
number two,
Number two, tech is just a shiny distraction.
number three with your
Offshoring
offshoring.
doesn't work.
Yep. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
What have you got for your best pieces of advice? Actually, I'll go with my one bad one. How about that? I'll just chime in with this.
Mm.
So when I was preparing for this episode, and for the benefit of the audience, I really struggle to think about lots of poor pieces of advice. That doesn't mean I haven't had bad experiences. I've had plenty of really ordinary experiences and made a ton of mistakes and, given money away to a bunch of marketers that did nothing and who hasn't, right? Like I think everyone's got, a few war stories like that. But I remember when this is like 20 years ago. Honestly, this is terrible, but I feel ashamed to share this, but I will. So when I was in a selling investment properties well over 20 years ago, the person tried to rile up, the troops back in the day. He's like, you always got to be high energy. You just got to, be really super enthusiastic and people are buying your energy. And whilst I think people are buying your confidence, they're buying your certainty. They're not necessarily buying what we might call manufactured energy, in my opinion. Now, as I say this, I'm sure that people will vehemently disagree with me because that's the way they quote unquote sell. Um, but I am not a high energy person by nature. And for me to be high energy, I can do so in an authentic way, but it's not how I want to communicate with people when I don't think they necessarily want a high energy coach. I think they want someone that's clear, concise, able to guide them, provide, considered feedback and so forth. And frankly, all of the coaches in our service are fairly measured in how we manage our energy. In any case, so I was all fired up back in the day. Got to be high energy. This guy comes in to look at investment properties. I'm like, oh, how are you? And he says, oh, yeah, I'm fine. And I think I'd seen him like months earlier. So I asked, how was your Christmas and New Year's break? He's gone, oh, well, it was uh, pretty bad actually, because my father passed away, and I had to prepare the funeral. And then in my high energy state, I'm like, oh, that's fantastic, boy. That must have been a lot of fun. And how did you go with that? And he's looked at me. He's like his jaws dropped, and I've just realized in that moment what I've said, because I was trying to be all quote unquote high energy. And to state the obvious, I couldn't have sounded like more of an idiot. And it was disrespectful. It was embarrassing. It was unprofessional, and it was just a really inappropriate way, I think, to try and focus on me and my energy rather than being present for him and his needs in that moment. And I'm sure I've made mistakes similar to that previous, but never ever one where I've tried to manufacture high energy for the sake of it, because it was what I was hearing 20 minutes ago in a rah-rah session. And so that was something that I'll never ever repeat, is always be high energy. I'll just be me and the version of me that I think is most appropriate, rather than, yeah, that. Which, by the way, the guy that used to do the rah-rah sessions before selling investment properties, he used to do like one of those pyramid schemes.
Hmm.
And so, those pyramid schemes are, I think, a lot of rah-rah in them. So,
You do make a really good point about authenticity. Like energy, for example, energy is a big part of what I do, but I genuinely believe in the product we've got is unique in what we provide our clients, and we provide great outcomes. We're in a really great industry where we're working with our clients, not against them, right? Like when you're in real estate or you're
hmm,
selling cars, you're trying to get the best possible price you can. You're essentially working again. For a broker, we're trying to get the best possible outcome we can. So I feel like, I mean, and I do come across all energy, but that's authentic to me.
yeah,
So I'm very mindful when we're training our guys that sitting there saying these are the frameworks we use, and they've actually sat in on meetings, and I've recorded meetings and strategy calls and whatever, and they go through them and like, oh my God, Trav, you have so much energy, you're go 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 go, and I'm like, yeah, I am. Don't try and be me. If that's not authentic to you, do not do
yeah,
it. Like, look at the frameworks, look at what we say and when we say it and how we say it, but you don't it needs to be authentic. If you try and replicate me, you're
yeah.
going to be inauthentic, and you're going to lose the client.
Yeah, or they could be attempting to be authentic, but it will feel misaligned. and
Hmm.
and certainly, yeah, I mean, I'll give high fives out and all that sort of stuff, and be quote unquote energetic. But my version of energetic is not the same as what I would call an over the top expressive style of energy, like a Tony Robbins. For
Hmm.
example, like we're contrasting, and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means that the way he brings energy is different to me, and arguably his is quite attractive for a certain type of audience that wants that environment. But I'm okay with knowing where my energy sits, and managing it appropriately. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was a bad piece of advice that I will never ever
Hmm.
repeat.
Yeah.
Um, all right, what have you got for your better pieces of advice?
So,
I'm saying better, by the way, instead of best, because I think best is very subjective.
I've taken so much advice over the last 8 years. It was sort of hard to tie it down, and I go back and I think about different things. But yeah, but one of the better piece of advice I got was invest in the S and me, not SMP. SME is a play on words, which is essentially invest in myself. So we're talking about education and personal and professional development.
Yep.
The late and great Kerwin Ray was a big one for this. I remember hearing him speak once. I think about 5% of his gross income he reinvested in himself. Alex Hormozy is a big one for this. A lot of your podcasters will speak about this, and what I found in my early years, and I still do it now. I still will invest a lot of time and a reasonable amount of money in improving whether it's me personally or in a professional sense, and the return. the returns that I've seen have been amazing. I'm very, very fortunate now. I get to hang around with people the caliber of yourself, for example, and a lot of the brokers that I hang around with are very, very top performing brokers. I'm very lucky in that respect. So I get a lot of value out of those interactions. But yeah, like still investing heavily in myself, and it's something that I will continue to do
What's an
moving forward.
example of where you've done that?
So look, I didn't pay for this one, but the Broker
Oh, tell me
Academy.
about when you did pay for, because that's
In the early days, I flew to Sydney and went and seen Grant Cardone, very American, very rah rah, like you're talking about.
yeah,
Probably gone away from it a little bit, but there was some probably like that was something that was there was some key takeaways in that 3 days that I spent in Sydney. I think I spent
doesn't matter how
five.
much it was.
Yeah, yeah, but it was a significant amount of money considering I couldn't believe I spent that much money on a 3-day course. I was like, oh my God, like I was insane, right? But massive amount of value, massive amount of value. Went to one recently
By the
with
way, that's the point. That could have been a 1 hour thing, and if that gave you like, we did not to labor this point too much, but we did a coaching session with someone the other day. We gave him one suggestion, and for which he uh, took it away into his credit that afternoon, implemented it, and has reported now saving 2 hours per day, which
hmm,
is, we worked it out. Essentially, it's 10 hours per week, or the better part of about 3 months back per annum.
hmm.
Um, I would say that has paid for his coaching service many times over simply because of one thing we've done. I mean, for anyone to get 3 months back worth of time is arguably a significant return. So it's not always the quantity of time in said service, like 3 days at the on-site event with Grant Cardone or whatever. I think it's sometimes, yeah, the value can happen in different ways. That's all.
I've had conversations, like just conversations with people in our industry that these conversations have gone for, let's say, an hour, right, at an event over a beer of an afternoon
Yep.
in between the day and the night events, right? And those conversations, I couldn't even put a value, the tens of thousands of dollars they've added value to
Yep.
the business, right? And this is literally a conversation with someone who I consider a mate over a beer. So there's so much value but you've got to be open to it. You got to be seeking it out. I can talk in later podcasts about some of the ways that I act it. Like I will go after particular relationships with people because like I feel like I can provide value to them and they can provide value to me. And that this is yeah, but that's a topic for another day.
All right.
Um,
So invest in your SME. Is that the thing?
yeah.
Okay, cool. And there was a quote here I wanted to say that reconfirms that point. So Jim Rohn was supposedly Tony Robbins' mentor back in the day. So Jim Rohn is like the Tony Robbins before Tony Robbins,
Mm.
was Tony Robbins. Work hard at your job and you can make a living. Work hard on yourself and you can make a fortune. And talks about the idea and focus around self-improvement and personal development. So anyway, I think it just sort of amplifies or validates your comment. All right, number
Yep.
two. What do you got?
Talked about buying time. So, as business owners and entrepreneurs, it's the one thing that we cannot replicate. We cannot create more of. We cannot create more time. There's only so many hours in the day, and you can trust me. I know you're going to roll your eyes at the hours I work, and you're, yeah. I shouldn't. Yeah, I need to get that under control. But buying time. So this was a conversation I had.
Well, do you need to get it under control, or is it a priority for you now to choose to do that and that you're okay with making that decision because it's designed or it's deliberate around? Because if you say making that under control, that would presuppose that you're not okay with it, but you're doing it anyway. Whereas, are you actually okay with it and you realize that it's a means to an end, not the end in and of itself?
It depends what day you get me on, to be completely honest. Look, it
Okay.
is a means to an end, and I've got a clear strategy. But it is like it's just that approach where like I've got probably I've had some really, really big years where putting in a huge amount of time and effort into the business, and we sort of shifted the business and took the business in a different direction, which means that that's probably going to continue for another couple of years. But
Yep.
like, yeah, I will get that time back
Yep. I'm sure you
at some
will.
point.
What was it? What was the advice here?
So the advice was around buying time. So this advice come from Nathan Smith from Birdie. We were sitting down at dinner in Sydney maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I was talking about an onshore hire and how expensive he was, and he goes, mate, if you could buy 40 hours a week, how much would you pay for? If you could buy 40 hours of your time back, a week. How much would you pay for that?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh,
Well, I think that's the quote that we want to go with. That's the
yeah,
advice, which is maybe more of a question.
yeah.
What was it? If you could buy 40 hours of your time back
How
per
much
week,
would
how
you
much
pay
would you
for it?
pay for that?
Yep.
Um, okay, great.
Yeah. So I found that to be a great piece of advice. And then that's what we've done. We've essentially
So it
scaled the
caused you to
business off the
stop in
back
your
end.
tracks a bit. Sorry, mate, I keep interrupting. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
being annoying here.
Yeah.
And that caused you to reflect on that question and go, that's an interesting question. I wonder what I would pay. And then
Yep.
realize that you had the capacity or the affordability to invest into resources that would give you that time back.
Yeah, yes. So we made the decision that that's what we were going to do. We're going to invest in talent and buy some time back so that I could continue to build the systems and processes and work on some key parts of the business.
Yep.
It did affect cash flow in the business. I'm not going to lie. The business was in its infancy back then, and we weren't like it's a much easier decision these days to make a decision on a higher than it was back then. But
Yep.
we made the decision, and we definitely benefited from it.
Curiously, there's a person called Dan Martell who's a well-known coach, particularly in the SaaS space. Craig Vaughan and Will Swain were in his coaching service for quite a number of years, actually. Dan's service, which SaaS Academy, I think it's called. Dan's since written a book called "Buy Back Your Time," and I think it's like a Wall Street Journal, number one bestseller. And anyway, it's a very, very popular book, and it amplifies the point you're talking about in terms of creating capacity for yourself. And when you're getting staff members, it's not necessarily to grow the business, albeit that's a benefit. It's to create demand or sorry, capacity for yourself, which in turn obviously allows you to think more
Yeah.
strategically, think differently, implement things that you may not have been otherwise able to do. What have you got for number three?
This is my last one. So know your numbers. So I business was growing. We were seeing a lot of success, and obviously, when we talk about getting into those rooms, I was getting into into the rooms with some pretty experienced operators,
Yep.
and they could just rattle off the numbers off the top of their head, or I would sit in their office and I'd look at their spreadsheets, and they were amazing, and I'm just like, Matt, it was very clear to me that I was running my business on feel. I
Yep.
felt like my business was going well. I
Yep.
seen my bank account, whatever the case may be, but it wasn't. I was running it on feel, not on numbers.
Yep.
So I taught myself how to build Excel spreadsheets. I'm still not very good at it, but it takes me a little while. But I've spent probably 100 hours building out my spreadsheets with all the correct formulas and all the data that I need to run the business. And the way it was explained to me from a colleague of mine, very, very smart man, and we're talking about pulling on levers. So through his spreadsheets, he can just pull on levers. He can go, if I pull on this lever, what is it going to do? And if your spreadsheets are built correctly, you can sort of go, okay, and all right, all right, if I pull, this is what's going to happen to my EBIT, or this is what's going to happen to my volume, or whatever the case may be, right? So the really, really good operators know their numbers, and it's something that's been a focus of mine for the last couple of years, and it's continually evolving. Like I was pretty impressed with the spreadsheets that I built, and I was in a business maybe a month ago, and I looked at their spreadsheets, and I was like, wow, like that mine paled in comparison to theirs. Don't get me wrong, much, much bigger business,
Yep.
but it's something. If you see a very, very good operator, I guarantee it that they've spent a lot of time getting an understanding, getting an understanding on their numbers and what levers they need to pull and what levers they need to push back at any specific time in their business.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really good points in there. One of which is specific to the levers is having knowing your numbers provides clarity, which means you can make informed decisions as to what you want to do. Whether that again is to buy back time. Maybe someone's writing 60 mil per annum, and they're doing it on 90 hours a week, and they want to do 60 mil per annum on 50 hours a week, and so they can make informed decisions as to where they can allocate funds or energy in order to free up time, for example. And the other comment there was in regards to um, the way in which people can, uh, yeah, with the spreadsheets. Whilst some spreadsheets may look like sexy as, I don't think and I hate for our audience to think that they would hear this and go, well, I don't have an incredibly sexy spreadsheet and therefore I can't do this. That would be, we would hate for them to have that takeaway. We'd want them to think, well, how do you start with some simple things and be consistent with them and potentially and progressively grow that over a period of time. I mean, what I ask our clients to just report on a couple of numbers only each month.
Mm.
So whilst in the past I used to request quite a number more, or quite a few more numbers from them. We also found that it was fairly clunky in getting that information back, and so we keep it reasonably simple. Some lag indicators, some lead indicators, and it gives us a reasonably healthy snapshot as to activity in the business, which in turn at least allows us, from a coaching perspective, to get a sense of the trends or patterns or trajectory. Now, we give them the spreadsheets and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, but regardless of the spreadsheets, is you're having some clarity of some simple core numbers, which in turn causes them to know the numbers in order to report to us.
Yeah, you can suffer from analysis paralysis at certain points. Like you can go pretty deep on this stuff, and some of the data, like it just like you said, you can get buried in it, and it'll stop you from making decisions. And sometimes, as entrepreneurs, right, you just need to make a decision. Like you might make a decision on feel. Like I've made some pretty big calls in my career, and gone against advice from some very smart people, and I did it. I done it on feel, and it was not all the time, but a lot of the times it's been successful, right? So I'm not saying run your business purely by the numbers, but it's something that will just help you make the right decision moving forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment because I got one client, and no matter what, uh, like he gets a rash if he looks at a spreadsheet. Like he has to go to the chemist and get like anti spreadsheet cream. So looking at numbers just isn't his thing. And so there's two brothers in this business, and one of them is very fact oriented, and one of them is extremely feeling oriented. So one's very intuitive, and one's very left brain oriented. And I think they certainly have a good complement because they're quite contrasting in their style. And it's to validate your point that just because you don't necessarily look at the spreadsheet all of the time doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you don't have an intuitive understanding as to how you or your business is performing.
You talk about that dynamic between those two brothers. That to me, I just go, oh my God, that is that business. If they've got the work ethic with the dynamic that they hold between themselves, that is just a recipe for like an amazing business. Like if they're very proficient at what they do and they're very, yeah, like you said, very left brain, very right brain, they're brothers, they're probably I mean, they can have those tough discussions and know that they can move on from it. That to me that that wouldn't surprise me if that business became a juggernaut at some point.
Well, they're ticking along very nicely. I will say that. All right, so I'm going to give you, actually, we'll just recap again, Trav. Your three there were invest
So
in your SME. Was that right?
invest in your SME, so invest in yourself, buy back time through the hiring of the right staff, and know your numbers. As you don't need to go in depth on the numbers, but knowing your numbers will help you make strategic decisions.
Great. So I'm going to chime in with a couple of my own thoughts around best pieces of advice, or in my case, memorable pieces of advice. One of which was actually from a speaker when I was working at the Yellow Pages, uh, maybe about 15 to 17 years ago, and he was giving some examples of product-based businesses that felt like that they didn't need to provide service because the product would do the work for them. The short version of this was he said, regardless of what business you think you're in, you're not in the Yellow Pages business, you're not in the digital marketing business, you're not in the cars business, you're not in the mortgage business, you're in the service business. And make no mistake about it, in every situation, you're in the service business. And I think the other comment he said there was you're in the customer business. Now, you could use the word client. That's irrelevant for the purpose of this conversation. Is you're in the customer business and the service business. And anyway, that to me has stuck because he told a pretty cool story about it, about the petrol station that provided terrible service, and he then proceeded to every single presentation he did for the next 5 years or so bag out that service station, which was probably bad for their business. Number two was always be adding value. So this is a simple one, but for me, it's an important one. I absolutely live by this in terms of what I do day to day. So uh, I won't go into all of the ways I do it. I don't think that's relevant, but I'll just keep it as simple as always be adding value. And that is always at the forefront of my mind. I will say this is if I get an email from someone, like a client asking me a question, I could respond to that question, but I'm always thinking, and what else? So what can I say or do or give here that would be in addition to whatever they've asked. And so that's, yeah, an extremely prolific part of what I hold as important. That came from a mentor of mine, again, about 15 years ago. Same mentor, learn to think strategically, or learn to think. Now, that sounds pretty weird because we all technically think, but some of us think differently. And not to quote the Apple slogan there from the 80s, think differently. But when we can learn to think differently and learn to think strategically, I, I, uh, I value that advice. I got to say, that's something I've learned to do. It wasn't something that came innately to me. And so that was an area that I've worked on myself for a long time, and I still do. So it's not something I've just done and have ticked, but the idea of learn to think and learn to think strategically was something that challenged me. It wasn't necessarily easy to grasp, but it was an area of growth, that's for sure. And the last one, strangely, but again, in the spirit of best pieces or good pieces of advice, was in the early days of running this coaching business, I was told by the same mentor once again, stop making cold calls. Find another way to source clients that doesn't involve you picking up the phone and having to cold call people, which I thought, wow, okay, well, how do I do that? And so, um, yeah, that was in my first year. I reckon I was in the business for only 6 or 8 months, and she said, "No, stop doing that. You got to find another way to go." And I didn't mind picking up the phone, right? I was happy to do it. But what she wanted me to do is build a business where it was a bit more predictable and consistent, reliable with the activities that would create consistency of inquiry rather than being reliant on me to pick up the phone and have those conversations. Now, that's not to say I don't have conversations with people. I do, but they're usually initiated as a consequence of them consuming content or being in our ecosystem or our world and so forth. And so anyway, that was again a growth area and not an easy one to embrace, but it did cause me to quote unquote think differently, which therefore changed how we did things.
Very interesting point you make because when you're early in your career, right, you don't have that leverage, you don't have that reputation to lean on, right? So you're sort of like that cold call. It's, yeah, as you said, if you're comfortable in that space, it's a very easy way to start, you know what I mean, like filling in your day and getting
Hmm.
and perfecting, even just perfecting your craft with the way that you like to interact with your clients or potential clients here. So I hate cold calling as well. I'm not a fan of cold calling, so I'm sort of with you on that. But I understand for our new to industry brokers, it's very, very hard. They need that repetition of you need to do 400 or 500 discovery calls. You need to do 400 or 500 strategy meetings to become proficient at them, right? So, and how do you do that? And so it's a tough one. Yeah, but I agree with you. Yeah, but so it's just so we can cover off. So client experience, think strategically.
You're in the service business and you're in the customer business.
Yep.
Always be adding value, learn to think strategically, and stop cold calling.
Yeah.
So those won't necessarily resonate with everyone here, but it wasn't, the mandate for today wasn't choose my best piece of advice that everyone will relate to. It's the piece of advice that I found related to me.
Those three pieces of advice you're giving there, when I'm thinking about some of the top performers that I know in our industry, that you're essentially describing them to a T. So yeah, I very, very good pieces of advice there.
Nice. Alrighty. Well, I think that's it for this episode. So hopefully that was useful for you, our audience, in terms of getting some insights that may be a little bit different. I guess the question we'd like you to leave you with here is what can you take away from this that would be useful for you? So if my coaching hat is on right now and you're hearing all of this stuff is, might fill your bucket for a little bit, but rather than just have your dopamine hit for a few minutes, why don't you think about how you can apply one of these principles that might be more relatable for you, whether it's to do with something to avoid the bad advice or something to lean into, which is one of the good pieces of advice that can expand your impact, your effectiveness, your capacity to take your business forward, etc. So we hope you do that, and we hope it contributes to your success, and as always, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Trev.
Thanks, guys.